because if you try to study all this, you're going to go crazy.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. I do have a treat for you today, and that is Brandi is back. If you recall, just a video ago, she shared with us her 5 tips for studying, and I was aware that she was developing this cool learning tool, so I thought I would have her back to talk to us today a little bit about that. If you're not familiar with Brandi or you didn't see that first video, let me just go ahead and show you a couple of things on her LinkedIn, and she can say a few things about herself. So this is Brandi's LinkedIn profile, as you can see, and she's super connected. She's been doing a lot of great things, currently sharing her learning journey through a blog on LinkedIn. Highly recommend checking that out. Just as an example of this, how you get there, I just want to show you. So if you go to her activity, click see all, and you can actually see the articles that she has been publishing. Super excited about that. But one thing that I do know, as I've been following her and learning a lot about her history, her career, and sort of this journey, is that she's an expert, or a SME, subject matter expert, in accelerated learning. So I thought she could tell us a little bit about that. What is your background, Brandi, in this area?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned on the last video that I had taken a class at Whitworth and then moved into super camp and spent some time with teenagers really beginning to understand accelerated learning. Before I even stepped on stage with them, I spent 270 hours learning more about how to engage them. And then I spent the entire following year learning more of a train the trainer type of model. And so that was where I was introduced to things like Tyagi and some of his game-based learning and mind mapping and using music in the classroom and all of those things that really make the learning come alive. I learned that through that experience. And then when I stepped into the TD world, I was able to apply what I learned, and that's where my expertise has come from.
Perfect. That's awesome. So could you tell us maybe a little bit more then about this tool you're building and promoting, actually? So you're building and promoting this tool, which I believe is sort of an accelerated learning tool. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Well, let me
Awesome.
tell you how it was born. And it was born actually from one of your previous guests, Dr. Bill Brantley. And I was at the ATD conference, oh gosh, maybe about a month ago, the virtual conference, first time they've ever done it. And I have been wanting to answer a question for about 25 years now, and nobody has been able to give me an answer that really satisfied me. And so I posed the question to Eileen Beek, and I said, Eileen, she writes tons of books. And my question was, how do you organize all of your thinking so you can create new knowledge? Because personally, I have notebooks all over my office. I have ideas written in margins of books. I have Post-it notes. I have files on my computer. I have everything strung everywhere. And she had given me some ideas, and then she invited me to have a call with her to learn more. And I had also posed that same question in the chat area. And Dr. Bill Brantley had written one word, and the word was Zettelkasten. And I thought, Zettelkasten, what is this all about? And then he also had put in a link. He said, you really need to check this out. And so I opened it up, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't sleep. It was the answer to that question that I had been trying to figure out this whole time. And basically, the Zettelkasten method was started years and years ago by a German gentleman. And I think about it, it's explained to me like almost a library card system. You're probably too young, Craig, but when I was young, they had library card catalogs. And you would pull out the card catalog, and there would be all of these different note cards inside that you could look up different books. And so basically what this gentleman had done was he had begun to write one note or one piece of information on each card. Makes me think back to my qualitative research for my dissertation. And on these cards, he began to write these pieces of knowledge, but the interesting thing was as he began to categorize them, and then he began to link them. So the cards could be laid out, and he could realize as he was looking at the information that you could take this idea that was completely unrelated to this idea, and when you combined it, it created new knowledge. And it just blew my mind. And I have a book recommendation actually for you, and it's called How to Take Smart Notes, One Simple Technique to Boost Writing, Learning, and Thinking for Students, Academics, and Nonfiction Book Writers by Sanke Ahrens. I'm going to show you the picture.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll put that in the description, a link to it.
That sounds great. And the book, it was great because he really breaks it down and talks about that method. And it's all about taking something that perhaps I learned 5 years ago and I'd written about it and I'd linked to it or tagged it, and then I could come and find it a little bit later on. And that's what made me think about this new learning system that I created inside of OneNote, because you really need a container to keep all of this knowledge. And I was thinking, okay. And I reached out to Dr. Brantley and I said, how do you keep the knowledge for your Zettelkasten? And where do you keep it at? And he said, I think that OneNote is the best spot. Uh-huh. And so as I was going in, I thought, wow, so all of my TD knowledge now that I have is broken out inside of my notebook based on what ATD told me were the big ideas. There's 3 domains in the capability model, and then there's 23 capabilities. And so now, as I'm beginning to find information to study for my CPTD certification, as well as just things that I want to share with people or bring into future trainings, I now have a container to put all of that knowledge and a tagging system if I want to go back and create new knowledge with those ideas.
That's brilliant. So I'm going to I think the best way to do this is for you to share your screen with the audience and sort of walk us through this tool. But before we switch gears, 2 points. One is, I think it's cool that you got some value out of a previous video, and there was a connection between you and Bill. And he's just a really great person, and I highly recommend people checking out his profile, which I'll put in the description as well, and reach out to him. So he's just filled with like really useful knowledge. And 2, I think it's awesome that you think that I'm young enough not to know what the card catalog system in a library is, but in fact, I do know that system, so that kind of dates me as well, or ages me. So, but the fact that you thought that I wasn't is just brilliant. So let's go ahead and switch gears then, and you can walk us through your system. All right, so it looks like we're on the screen now. Do you want to tell everybody what we're looking at?
Yeah, sure. So this is the notebook that I created, and you'll see on the left-hand side there are sections, on the right-hand side there are pages underneath those sections. And when I was starting this, I realized, Brandi, you need a structure. There were so many different things that were coming at me. So for instance, we have our certification preparation program. There was information coming from there. There was also information coming from the electronic TD box. And then there are people online that are creating wonderful different job aids that go along with this as well. And there was so much information, I needed a place to put it. And so what I had done is I said, okay, I need a place to put this. I'm going to start with the steps to the system of how I'm gathering this information. And then I'm going to think about a way that I can use the system forever as a TD professional. So let's start with the way that I'm gathering the information. There are 5 steps. The first is to capture the outcomes into my notebook. And so what I found is that there's very specific information that I need to know in order to pass certification. So I needed to figure out what that was and where to find it. And I'll show you in just a moment. The second was going into the TD box and highlighting that information and the answers to those questions, as well as finding it inside of the prep course. There's 2 different ways you can find it, and it's up to you, your preference. The third is capturing that information inside of your notebook in a way that's sticky. It has to stick to you. It has to be meaningful. It has to make sense. And so I have a way to do that. And then creating flashcards with that information, and then also creating flashcards that apply the knowledge, because the TD box is the knowledge that we need in order to pass the test, but the assessment is how do you take that information and apply it on the job. So let's start with the first step. The first step is to capture those outcomes in your notebook. So you'll notice here I've got the 3 different domains, domain 1, domain 2, and domain 3. And I'm going to go into domain 3.34. And you'll notice here at the top, this came directly from the TD or the CPTD handbook. And it said, these are the capabilities. This is what you need to know. And it outlined, tells us exactly what we need. The thing that was missing that I noticed was that it didn't tell me in 3.4F, I needed skill in designing and implementing communication strategies in order to drive talent management objectives, but I didn't know where I could find that inside of the TD box. And I kept finding myself reading this, trying to find it in other places I couldn't. So what I have done is I've gone in and said, okay, inside of the TD box, if you open to 3.4.7, you're going to find it. And if you're like me and you have the physical book, yourself. I know many of us purchased it. You'll find that on page 478. So I captured that information. So the first thing that I needed to do was I needed to capture these learning outcomes. So in 3.4F, let me show you how I do that. I go into the certification course, and I know that it's 3.4, so that's under organizational capability. So I open that up. And then it's 3.4, talent strategy and management, and then it's F. A, B, C, D, E, F.
Now, I just want to be clear that they would know, like, 1 is the first domain, 2. So if it's designated with a 3 as the first one, 3 point, that means the third domain, correct?
Correct.
And then you can count down those levels there, A, B, C, D, and that'll take you to whatever the number is, which is F, correct?
That is correct.
All right, yes. Perfect. All right.
So then what I do is I actually did this in one sitting. And I did it one time. It took me 90 minutes to do it. But I think that if you can batch those tasks and keep like tasks together, it's going to make you much more efficient. And so what I had done is I'd gone in and you hit click to view. And then you take this information and you download it. So I printed it to PDF. And the reason that you print it to PDF is once it's in a PDF form, you can very easily pull this information out and you don't get the icons on the left because this is the information that you need. So I print it and then I give it a name. And the name that I give it is just right on the top here. I go up to the top of the notebook and I copy that and that becomes the name. So I have all of the outcomes in one spot. Okay. Your next step then is these are the two: describing the elements of a communication plan and listing the methods for obtaining stakeholder feedback. So I'm going to go back into the notebook and I'm going to paste those two inside of my notebook. So this is what is going to be on the certification test, what I need to learn. The next thing that I do is I go into the TD box and I find the answers to those questions. So I know that it's in section 3.4.7. And so what I would do is I would come here, go to continue reading, and then I'm going to do a simple search, 3.4.7, enter. Okay, so we typed in 3.4.7, and then we'll go down and we'll find it here, 3.4.7, we'll click on it, and then it'll give us the skills in designing and implementing the communication strategy to drive the talent management objectives. And here are our big ideas. Determine the critical information, determine the audience, identify the methods available, identify the timeline, and so on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my notebook and I'm going to capture the big ideas because I just need the knowledge at this point. I don't need to go beyond the knowledge. So I capture that information here. My next step would take it to the next level and really to find out how you might apply that knowledge. And you'll notice what I've done down here is I've captured some of the assessment questions. Where I got those assessment questions was in that same unit, designing and implementing the communication strategy. I open up the pre-assessment and I go in and I take the pre-assessment and then I capture those questions so I can go back and review those. So when this opens up, gives me the question, how does a communication plan help talent development professionals? I will read through this. I will either snip it or cut and paste, bring it back over to my notebook, and you'll see my assessment questions right here. This helps me in my final step, and personally, I'm an auditory learner, so I go in and I create brain tapes that I can listen to while I sleep, and this builds out that for me so I can read these questions along with the answers and listen to them and process while I sleep.
That's perfect. And just a quick tip for those of you that are interested in my content from an efficiency and effectiveness point of view. So one great thing about using a Windows system is if you were to do print screen and then it would automatically be copied. You wouldn't even have to use a screen clipping and you could paste it into there. I'm not saying like Brandi's doing it wrong. I'm just trying to say that that's a quick trick that one great thing about the print screen for Microsoft, it automatically saves it as it's copied. So if you were to be building a Word document in Excel and you just need to put the screen in there or a segment of the screen, that's how you would do it. So thanks, Brandi, for letting me do a quick insight for my listeners.
No, I appreciate that. And afterwards, I'm going to have you teach me how to do that, Craig.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so Brandi, one thing that I am seeing here is that what you've developed, and I think you're going to explain the tool in more detail, but is a system for learning. If someone were to download this, they're not going to get all of this content because it's clearly probably copyrighted. What you've developed is the method for them to study, correct?
That's correct. They get the method as well as the study tips, which I have down here, the strategies and videos to go along with those strategies. They'll also get a 12-week year. So it's planning out that 12 weeks and what that's going to look like week by week. And then what I think is really a big piece of it as well is this table of contents, because it tells you exactly where inside of the TD box you're going to find more information. And if you are hunting and pecking and searching, it takes forever to find that. It's all in one spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like probably the biggest value. When I downloaded, I was like, wow, this is like genius. So great. Okay.
All right, so the next piece of it, I mentioned the 12-week year, and it's really just going through and looking at the key actions and tactics that you would take and what your focus needs to be over the course of that year. The strategies walk you through, and there's different lessons and videos that go along with it, as well as some brandified tips that I've added of how I've done it. So one of those tips that I mentioned earlier was that I took all of the outcomes at one time. I downloaded them because in 90 minutes, I was done with pulling all that information and pasting it into my notebook. So things that I've learned along the way, I share there in the success tips. And then the certification tracking is really just a place for you to go in and think about the next 3 years, what that's going to look like in capturing any kind of learning that you do along the way so that you can easily recertify, and it's all in one place. The thing that I do want to just mention one more time is the whole Zettelkasten method. So once you begin to find things online, things that you can use in your career, this is a great container to keep those things in. So if you come across something, for instance, in the area of multiple intelligence, you can put it inside of this multiple intelligence area and keep it for the future. And I think that's going to be the benefit of this in the future, because this becomes your Zettelkasten container, and then you'll be able to use it from here on out to make sure that everything is connected to create that new knowledge.
That's awesome. I think other benefits of it, especially it being in OneNote, is first, it's going to be available to you on your desktop. It's going to be available to you on your mobile. It's going to be available to you online, because it's going to be hopefully saved for you in your cloud. So I think that's one big benefit of OneNote. The second thing is you can invite others to contribute. So I could easily see this as, if you have a couple of friends that are studying for the exam together, you could be creating together as well.
That's absolutely true. I would agree. And you mentioned the mobile device. At night when I go to sleep and I listen to these brain tapes, I might look at my flashcards, listen to some things right before I go to sleep. It doesn't take very long, maybe 10 minutes. And then that morning I will turn on my phone and I'll go through that section of my flashcards again. 10 more minutes, doesn't take much time. But as I'm sleeping through the evening, 8 hours, I'm processing that information. And so it's fresh in my brain when I wake up the next morning. I do have a couple more tips for you.
Okay.
One, especially if you are a remote learner, because I realize that we're in this COVID situation. I went from a face-to-face proctoring event to taking my test on August 10th right here in my home. Is two little tips I'm going to do. One is that while I'm studying, I have a little Scentsy that's, creating a certain smell in my office. That's the smell that I use when I study. It's also the smell that I'm going to have on test day. And then number two is when I'm studying, I chew cinnamon gum. When I take the test, I'm going to be chewing cinnamon gum. There's something about, using the different senses that if you can anchor your studies to that, you will be more successful on test day.
That's awesome. That's great. Perfect. Absolutely love that. And I'm guessing that's sort of, I know you've read a lot about this. So is there like a science behind that? Is it a neuroscience?
Yep. I think that, I learned about it through my accelerated learning studies. Yes.
Awesome. That's perfect. So there you have it, folks. You're just getting all kinds of value out of this YouTube video. So is there anything in particular that you've been doing over the past few months that you would say could benefit most everyone, other than your system? Any one sort of thing that people should be doing? One thing that I take away from this, for example, is consistency. I mean, that for me is just like if you're going to be studying for something, whether it's long term or accelerated, but probably especially accelerated, is you have consistency to your system. So that was a takeaway. Do you have any like one item that you would recommend to people?
Yes. And for me, my greatest gift of everything that is in my life is ideas and knowledge. And so it's a structure or a container to put those ideas and knowledge in, because I have all sorts of ideas, but if I put them in a margin of a book and I never open the book again, they're worthless. There's nothing that's there. And that happens to me. It happened to me for the last 25 years. Now I have a system that I can begin to put these things in, tag them to one another, and realize that when I put the two ideas together, I can create new knowledge. And then from that new knowledge, I'm a natural connector. It's what I love to do. Then I can share that knowledge with the world. And that's my gift of giving back. So that, to me, it's been that ability to connect.
Awesome. While we still have it on screen share, and I think we'll switch back because then we can have our face views. But where can someone find this really cool, efficient, and effective tool for studying?
That sounds great. And I'm so glad that you asked. So I have a link here that I'll make sure that you have for the show notes, Craig, but it's just the CPD Success Notebook. It's $99 and you can build your own. I've walked through the steps on how to build your own. I've also shared in detail on LinkedIn on how to build your own. But a lot of people said, Brandi, I'm a busy professional. I don't have time to build my own. Give me the container. So if you'd like the container for yourself, it's just as quick. You could have it open on your desk in 5 minutes. You just have to come to this website, order it, and then I will email it to you. You'll be able to open it right inside of OneNote and get started.
Awesome. And my understanding is that this is a limited time price, right? At some point you have a plan to increase the price. Is that correct?
I do, yes. So this price is through the CPTD pilot window, and the window runs through the end of September. So you have till October 1st to get this discounted rate.
Awesome. I will put the link in the description so people can go directly from this video to that screen. Let's go ahead and, if you don't mind, stop sharing so then we can wrap up. Unless you have other things that you wanted to show us. I believe you were done, correct?
Yes, I
Awesome.
am. Let me just
Perfect.
stop sharing and then I'll hand it over to you. Yeah, and you know, Craig, honestly, I think this is something, as we're talking about this, I think it's something that anyone can use, because I was thinking to myself, I should create one of these for people in HR that are doing certifications, for anything. But really, I think if anyone has the system, they can use it and put in their own content.
Mm-hmm.
It would be really simple for someone to do.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I think one of the biggest values for those studying the CPTD is that it already has all of the sort of chapter notes or the areas of knowledge. But I know because I was actually on the team that was working on the new examination for the APTD, the Associated Professional Talent Development. So I was actually kind of seeing how the sausage is made, and I would guess just based on the model that was being used by the third-party vendor that this is a pretty standard process or way of studying for any certification, that they're going to have very specific areas of knowledge, very specific skills or knowledge points that you need to study. They're not going to test for everything. So I know in one of your posts, you reminded people that, look, you don't have to study everything, people. You just need to study what are the 3 capabilities, and then within that, the exact numbers that are being suggested on the exam. That's correct, yeah?
That's correct. Yeah, because if you try to study all this, you're going to go crazy.
For sure.
But if you look at those 3 things under 3.3 and you focus on that, you are going to cut your study time down. I don't even know. And I know this because I started out with started studying the CPLP, and I was mind mapping everything I was doing. I was going through the whole TD block, and then I moved over to the CPTD. And then when this clicked 6 weeks in, I'm like, this is all I need. I don't need everything inside this book. No. I just need these things.
Yeah.
And then it was like, that's how I'm going to laser focus. And that's the magic.
Yeah. And I personally like to go and look on the TD website and look for articles that are there. And I think your system allows people very easily to copy and paste those links right into the area that it was studying. So I highly recommend that folks get that. As you heard today, limited time offer to get that, purchase it at a discounted price. The link is in the description. My name is Dr. Craig Ingstrom, and on this channel, I provide a variety of videos on topics related to improving the efficiency and effectiveness of your workflow, primarily from a communication point of view. And as you saw today, this is a great communication tool using one of my favorite products from one of my favorite companies, Microsoft. So it's not going to be surprising that this video is on this channel. I do recommend that you reach out and follow Brandi because you're going to just find her immensely valuable, I think, beyond the CPTD. So follow her on LinkedIn. I will post some other sites that you can find her on in the description. Thank you all for your time. Brandi, any last words before we head out?
I just want to remind everybody that in order to get across the CPD finish line, we have to link arms and do it together. So link arms with as many people as you can find that are doing this journey. Do it with them. There's plenty of certifications for everybody. Let's just link arms and get across together.
All right. Thank you, Brandi, for your time. And let's go link some arms. Everybody, I hope to see you back in the next video.